Good morning. Can everyone hear me back there? Nice to see you all. Hope you're all wide awake. In this session, Brian Novacek and David Wilcox will walk us through tips for Data Hub. So they're going to give their own experience and tips, and we will have time for Q&A. I want you to know that, so just wait till the end, and they will go. They will take your questions. First of all, a few housekeeping tips, as always. Please make sure, just double check that your cell phone is off. We don't want any disruptions. I want to remind you all, I think by this time all of you have downloaded the app. Make sure that you do that, and please, fill out the survey on the sessions. And one-on-one appointments. If any of you haven't booked any, I recommend that you do so. We're really fortunate that the hotel is near our headquarters, so we have all of our technical experts here. And so you should take advantage of time to sit down and have them answer your specific questions about what you're trying to do. And in order to do that, you can do it through the app, or you can just walk down here after this session, and at the end of sort of where the rooms end, there is a table and it says one-on-one, and you can book your appointment there. Okay? So I'm going to turn it over to you two.
Thank you. So Dave and I today sort of have two presentations in one for you. I'm going to go over how we started our journey and why, and Dave's going to go over a little bit of the automation that we've surrounded our hub with. First of all, I wanted to ask a couple questions. How many people are here just looking at MarkLogic? They haven't actually purchased it yet. Okay. How many people, so I'm assuming the rest of you actually have purchased it? How many of you actually have it in production? How many of you have mission critical on production? Okay, thank you. So a little bit about ourselves. We're with Erie Insurance. We're located in Erie, Pennsylvania. We're a regional insurer in about 13 states. You can see our stats there. We're primarily property and casualty insurer. How we got started was a number of years ago. We really the messaging this morning really resonated a long time ago for us. We had a lot of silos, had a hard time doing ETL, all that traditional fun stuff. Traditional data warehousing had lots of problems, slow, costly. And we started out with a POC. Started out with a POC. We went through, we took the green dots there, that was an actual project in flight with senior staff. Took the exact same story cards, and we brought in MarkLogic. We brought in our current, the green dots were being currently staffed by about 5 or 6 senior technicians. The blue one was staffed by, we call them 2.5 people. We took a young developer, had no idea what MarkLogic was, and we had another gentleman join them and an intern. And we gave them 1 week's notice. We gave them access to MarkLogic documentation, and the following Monday we teamed them with a pre-sales engineer from MarkLogic for 2 days, and then they were off and running. And basically, to make a long story short, the green dots represented about 1,300 hours to get to the same point, to complete about 39 story cards. The blue dots were about 300 hours. The blue dots actually completed the task, loaded the data, and had something working. Our green dot friends were still chugging along, so to say. So that really was a great proof point for us in our leadership to see the difference that can occur. And we've been doing this for a couple of years now. And one of the interesting things is that, I've been talking to other folks, and in the keynotes is really the culture change that goes on, right? That whole change management. So just because you can do something like this and show quick consumption and utilization, when you actually get out there and how you implement it and put it into your culture is really very impactful. And it takes a lot of knowledge sharing, repeatability to get that message across, right? There's a correct way to do it, and then there's other ways to do it. Just because you can make the system turn green and power on doesn't mean it's being done correctly. And being asked to do this presentation was to share some of the insights that we've had along our way. And that's probably one of the most powerful ones to share with you guys. It's not so much around settings and whatnot, but the change, the disruption of going to a NoSQL technology versus a relational has really been, it can be very time consuming to explain repeatedly how things need to be done and how things change. So we went along, we invested in a starter pack, we went through a process to where we operationalized the software. Initially, we lived on shared enterprise VMware and virtual servers. We made the traditional promise that we want to consume a lot of resources and we would leave. Our first implementation, we didn't deploy the hub framework at all. And so that was interesting. Our first ingestion process was actually a custom-written CSV process that we wrote. We made that determination because we didn't want to go backwards. We had our requirements we wanted to execute. And as we did that, it worked. The problem was it was not something that we wanted to repeat. We wanted all the data going into the hub to be in XML format. So we actually created a process to where we stitched together various CSV files and created the XML before we actually loaded them into our final database. Today, so our very first project that went into production, we actually completed it in about, 6 or 8 weeks? Which was fantastic. After that proved the point to make a larger investment and move forward. We went to dedicated hardware and storage to support our hub at that point. We went to a hyper-converged technology for our servers and storage. We then implemented the Data Hub framework at that point. This was about 2 years ago? It's about 2 years ago. And then since then, we actually have MarkLogic services helping us because we're not skilled, we're ramping up. They are skilled. So we've been working with them, and as we go along, been contributing to the framework development back here at MarkLogic, and as we've been going along. We implemented high availability, both in terms of the forest, so every forest has a replica, and also in terms of our physical servers. Our ingestion process, we have adopted the hub pattern. We use that. We actually had to go back and refactor our previous one we had for the CSVs and retool that a bit. And while that wasn't a costly effort, but it did show why we needed to have one method of ingesting data. Not every single domain or project should be allowed to go off and do their own. You really want one consistent method of putting data into the hub. That's very important. So this got changed last night, but some important things to talk about here. We had help. So talking through what the keynotes have been talking about, the harmonization and everything, right? In your ingestion, this is where you're loading data into your staging area. We call it prep. That's also another important thing is context. So it's sort of a funny story. In our dev environment, we have a hub, right? It has what MarkLogic will call a staging area, but it's in dev. So you're talking to the rest of the enterprise, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You have staging and dev? So we quickly had to rename staging to prep. So we have prep and final because people would just be very confused. So context, a lot of times when you're talking about something this new has proven to be a challenge. So here you're loading the data and the harmonization. One of the other lessons to share is in harmonization, let's say we're loading a file of 100 elements. We only need 10 of them. So we're going to load the entire file. We will only harmonize or expose 10 of those elements because that's what we need for the current project that we're doing. The rest we store. And another concept that's been really important is for people to understand the envelope pattern and the difference between what's in the envelope, the difference of versioning, and what's exposed in the metadata through your harmonization or core job that you run later. That has been very important, And that has really been another one of those concepts where we have to repeat a lot. We used versioning initially to show people, they're coming from traditional DB2 Oracle SQL environments. NoSQL is extremely new. They didn't understand, how am I going to get my data back? How does it connect and work? So they wanted proof that the changes that are coming in real time from our live core systems are actually, there's no magic. There's no, the data coming in is the data, the changes that occur because that's what's supposed to happen. So we use versioning behind there to show people historically, so far back, here's where we started, here's change 2, here's change 3, here's current state. So that has been very important to help build some credibility. Some of the other things that we've gone through here, as you look through here with the indexing is also interesting. That has been, we recently had to re-index a couple weeks ago. Well, maybe it was a couple months ago. And it's interesting, what led to that would normally traditionally have taken us weeks, to get through and schedule and do. It was only a couple hours here, which was a huge game changer for us, and it really wasn't a huge impact to the system. And it's funny when we're talking to MarkLogic, they're like, oh my God, you're gonna have to, go re-index for a couple hours. And I'm like, okay. They're like, well, that's horrible. I'm like, no, that's great. Usually this would have taken me a weekend or, a couple days. A couple hours is fine. But it's funny, as you evolve and you have this disruptive process, hopefully in a couple years for us, that couple hour inconvenience would be something to where we share the same level of concern about. This is a picture of a high-level view of our current implementation that we have. Dave's going to be talking to you guys about the code deployment and all of that. We do use Ops Director for monitoring all of our environments. We do have an interesting use of the hub. You'll notice we have separate ingestion servers that are constantly processing compared to our D&E nodes. We have our management servers where we load MLCP, prep, and our code promotion. We have a load balancer in front of our enterprise scheduler. We also are consuming through our enterprise bus. We have a load balancer there. So what we do, which has been nice for us, because earlier today they talked about how you don't want to give users direct access, and we don't do that. What we do is we have a standard set of hub-side services that provide generic APIs, and then people can come along and write their own APIs from the application side and consume however they wish of those standardized services. And we expand the hub services as new projects and needs come along. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dave, and he's going to talk to you guys a little bit about the automation.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Dave Wilcox. I've been a DBA at Erie Insurance for about 3.5, going on 4 years now. We had MarkLogic for about 2 years, so before we got MarkLogic, I was mostly working on a couple different relational systems. So when we first got MarkLogic, so what I'm going to talk about is how we've been able to leverage the Data Hub framework for deployment and configuration changes to our hub, and how that's been enabled us to deliver faster, reduce time spent configuring, and reducing overall DBA time managing the environment. And then also a little bit on what we've done to create consistency across all our environments with this deployable framework, and then also using Gradle for some on-demand services. So our initial implementation, when we first got MarkLogic, and then I was tasked with the one that was going to be figure out how to install this, set this up, make it available. We started just doing everything how we would do it with our other databases, playing around in the admin console, defining all of our forests, building it all out very manually. We didn't have a hub yet, and then any of our processes or procedures that we were doing to set all these environments up, we were keeping checklists and spreadsheets on how we would go from environment to environment to create our implementation. If there was any requests that would come through, we'd turn them around in a couple days. In our relational world, that was all fine. That was considered normal. Early automation, started to see that, okay, well, MarkLogic has this really interesting and robust and well-documented admin API. We could probably do some cool stuff with this to reduce some time. So started playing with the admin API, writing a bunch of scripts to start building out our deployments for us manually, but still just kind of saving those scripts like up in the NAS somewhere, pulling them into Query Console, running them when we needed them. It's not really automation, it was just scripting, and we would still just execute those scripts manually. Still kind of intensive on time. Saved us a little bit of time, helped a little bit of consistency, but it wasn't really automated. And the one thing that we really noticed as we started implementing the hub that was different from the rest of our environments is that, like in our organization, the DBA team, database admins, own the environment. We don't typically just give out broad privileges for developers to do anything they want on that environment. And that works pretty well in the relational world, in that you don't want people applying crazy DDL everywhere. But we were seeing it too, though, with MarkLogic, with like what they were talking about in the keynote earlier today, about actually being a management, whether the database is actually managing your data or not. There's quite a lot of code and modules and changes that we're seeing was going to occur in this environment. And if we were going to do things the old way, from an operations perspective, what we were doing relational, all we were going to do is hold our developers back immensely as they're trying to find a DBA to apply every single change that they're moving through Agile and committing quite a lot of changes. So what we did is we leveraged the Data Hub framework and made sure that all of our changes, configurations, new modules were moving through that framework and being deployed rather than trying to do it all manually. So some terms for anyone that might not be familiar. I'm talking a little about Gradle. Gradle is a build, basically it's a Java build tool. And then there's a build.gradle file, which is where you define all of your Gradle tasks. Tasks just are sort of like these commands that you can create. You can create a module, and you can use Gradle to put a wrapper around it, and you can run it as a command line tool. Tasks are any of these individual processes that we've created to run off of Gradle. And there's a variety of plugins that you can use. Common one being Java, and then the only one that we're using is called ml-gradle, which gives us makes it easier to use the admin API for MarkLogic with the Gradle build tool. So that ml-gradle plugin makes it easy to leverage the MarkLogic management API. Allows us to deploy our roles, databases, forest users, modules, any of our configuration for our environment. So then the automation that we kind of put around this, using a combination of source control application like Git, the operational data hub framework with Gradle and Gradle tasks, and then a deployment tool, we've been able to pretty much entirely automate our delivery of changes to the environment, where we don't really need to have a DBA in the middle trying to do everything. So our changes are applied, any of our changes that are applied to our hub, they're committed right to a repository by either developers or DBAs. Our deployment tool is always sort of monitoring our repository when it sees changes occur, pulls it into itself, gives it a version, and then either on a schedule for lower environments or on demand, we can through our deployment tool execute a deployment, and it would go and it would take whatever version of our hub we want to deploy to any of our environments, and it will go out there and it'll deploy it for us. So those deployments can contain any or all of the following: app servers, app server changes, databases, our forest, replicas, modules, users' roles, configuration changes. Our goal really is that we don't make any changes directly through the admin console. It all is scripted out in Data Hub framework and JSON config files, and that it's all committed and deployed. The other thing that we've been able to do is enable a lot of self-service through this pattern, where we've gone and built modules for other common activities that typically a developer would request a DBA to do for them, like anything with refreshing data in a lower environment, changes to collections, anything that we wanted to sort of give the developers the ability to manage themselves in lower environments rather than always having to put a request through. So specific ones from MarkLogic would be anything that they're changing with collections, things like that, et cetera, deleting data, reloading data. So we would just build modules, but put a Gradle task around it, and then through a job scheduler, give our developers the ability they can just submit a job, and then that would go and it would execute on a non-prod environment, and we wouldn't even have to worry about it. So this is that same image before. So basically we have our repository, any of our user changes contain, it's all just in the hub framework. Our deployment tool will just copy down our project to a management server, which has all of our agents running on it for like our job server or anything like that would come off and kick off any of our Gradle tasks for our hub flows, harmonization flows, or any of our admin processes. And this works out pretty well for us because we still have a lot of batch processing that go into like a lot of wider batch logic that's outside the hub. So whenever it kicks off any of our data loads, it's been able to integrate well with the Gradle framework, that it all snaps right in. Some of the benefits we've seen from this: reduced downtime and reduced errors due to maintenance. It gives me a lot more sleep at night instead of having to be up at 2 in the morning and going through and applying changes like how we've always done it before. It's reduced our administration time significantly, trying to keep track of all these changes, which is another big one too, is because we don't just have one hub project going on. We've had several with all different development teams that are all going in and working on their data sources, getting them ingested into our hub. Being one admin trying to interact and interface with all of these different groups would just be probably impossible without getting this all automated. So we've been able to deliver faster and more consistently. Our developers are waiting around a lot less for any of the changes they're pushing to actually get applied so that they can continue on. And it's been able to help us a lot with compliance and audit standards, and that a lot of times when we define a change to our environments, our auditors want to know, well, how can you prove to me that that change request you put through is actually what you logged on and did? Because no one's directly touching our environments, we can do that pretty easily. And then enabling that self-service. So some of the results that we've seen from this is we've had many concurrent projects managed by one admin. The number of deployments is just to kind of show like how the rate of change that we've been seeing. So far, in the beginning of this year, from January to end of March, we've made 251 deployments to our environments. In our entire previous year, from January through December, we did 306. I haven't looked at it recently, but I imagine we're probably pretty close to, just in our first quarter of this year, have put the rate of change out there equal to our entire previous year, and it's probably just going to continue to accelerate from there. And it hasn't really had any change and impact on me, because it's all I just have to make sure that our automation keeps running. And then we're estimating that this is saving on admin time for this year so far about 125 hours of work, working with developers, get changes applied, and then all the rework with reapplying those changes all the way up our stack. Average deployment time takes about 2 minutes deploying the Gradle build tool. If we're doing just a standard change, or if we're setting up an entirely new environment, once MarkLogic's all set up, we want to put our entire hub application out there, that runs and builds everything out in about 10 minutes. instead of a few hours. I think that's all. If anybody, open it up to questions, unless you had anything else.
No.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, David. So we're going to open up to questions. So if anyone has a question, raise your hand and I'll get the mic over to you. But since they were silly enough to give me the mic first, I'm going to take the opportunity to ask a couple questions myself. I'll start with you, David. As a DBA, you're working much more closely, I'd assume, now with the development team. Can
Yes.
you kind of describe more how your life has changed for the better or for the worse, or some of the key differences of what you do day to day working with a set of MarkLogic developers?
I think the one thing that we know, or I noticed pretty quickly, is that just with the nature of MarkLogic and the hub and how much of the development work is occurring in the database, as far as rather than outside of it and around it, we've had to partner with our developers a lot more strongly, which has led to a much better relationship, I think, within our organization, where we're working a lot more together rather than
You can
maybe
say
DBA
adversarial.
relationships in the past.
Since you're using Gradle, did you look at Roxy too? Just curious, because Gradle's pretty new, right?
I've looked at it a little bit. We kind of with Gradle kind of already being kind of built into the hub framework. That's just sort of what we ran with.
So you never played with Roxy?
No.
Yeah.
No, because we had our original implementation of MarkLogic for I don't know, how long would you say before we went to a hub?
Almost a year.
Almost a year, and that was still just very much this is all brand new, kind of trying to figure out the broad basics of everything. And then when we went to the hub framework and saw how you can deploy the hub out there, can we pack everything in there? So we kind of just got going with Gradle that way.
Okay, one more tiny question.
Yeah.
It looks like you're in 9, because I saw you're using Ops Director.
Yeah,
right?
we're in 9.
Can you give us a little tidbit when you converted from 8 to 9? How was it? Or did you go straight to 9?
We had 8 originally. We upgraded to 9. We didn't really have any issues with that. It was just like it felt like just like we were applying any other like maintenance release.
Thank you.
Hi. I assume you're using a data hub framework for batch movement of data and batch harmonization, right?
Right.
Are you using any test automation tools to test your batch data ingestion and batch data harmonization?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Do you
fully hear.
use any test automation tools to test your?
Oh, yeah.
Test
Yeah, what are
tools?
you using for test automation and automating that side of verification?
I mean, we have we in our test environment we have a test batch that runs, so we make sure that it's all executing smoothly through that. But then as far as actually like test cases and all that kind of stuff would be more on the developer side. On the operations side, we've just make sure it's all return 0.
Yeah, we have a QA team, and they have part of the operationalizing of the database when we first brought it in was it had to work with a lot of our existing tooling. So our test folks hooked it up to their tools, and I'm drawing a blank as to what their names are. I want to say
Like load runner and things like that.
yeah, they have several over there. So they do. We currently have some apps in production, and that runs through for the data verification. We go through and we have some audit controls that go into place. So I know I insert 100 land, or 100 came in, 90 land. I know where 10 go. So we have a number of controls in place there.
Great. Any other questions?
We
got one up front.
One in front. All right, we're going to do the one in front, and I will walk back there after.
Are you using I understand that your process is end-to-end automated, right? So
Yeah.
what kind of tools you use to automate the entire process?
The like our deployment tool that we're using.
So basically the ingestion and harmonization scripts and like, if any during the process, if any errors, did you like, you might have done email automation and other stuff.
Well, so we have like our normal batch scheduler, which is actually still a mainframe application that has agents that run our open systems box. So that kind of handles for us. If we're kicking off like an input flow or a harmonization flow, that has an agent that logs in, runs a Gradle task that executes that, and that's waiting for a return code if there's an issue. And if there were to be an issue, our just normal batch scheduler would alert us and send out emails if any action needed to be taken.
Okay, are you doing the full load or any incremental loads?
A full load versus incremental load. We have like it runs daily. And then we have a mix of batch and real time that comes into the hub.
Okay.
So I'll follow up on that one. So on the daily batches, is that a full snapshot of some of the data sources, or is that incremental on what happened on that day?
Oh, yeah, incremental.
Okay.
So like when a new project comes online, we'll do a complete load of that data source, right? So for example, like a billing system, right? We will load that entire domain. And then based on how long that takes, then we turn around and we'll do a catch-up. And then we'll switch into a normal real-time feed that we're getting during certain hours. And then we have an evening batch because we're still primarily a batch company for a lot of our data processing.
So have you worked with the Data Hub framework, Quick Start, and the user interface? Is that something you work with from a kind of develop and figure things out? Because I'm assuming in production you're using the headless version of the framework, which is all batch and scripted and automated.
I mean, a lot of the hub development has been between on our development side and working with MarkLogic consultants. I think they pretty much are running headless in all environments. I know like we've played a little bit with the GUI just to get up and running, but yeah, we'd run headless in all our environments.
Okay. There was a question back here, I think.
All the way back there.
Yeah.
Hi, I see that you're using Ops Director for monitoring all your systems. Could you describe what your experience has been working with it, and if it also does your production monitoring, and if that has affected performance?
Yeah, so far I think our experience with Ops Director has been pretty positive, especially with like how much has been in there, and it's just its first release, because it was only, last year we didn't have anything, but like on that side, the one thing that like I'm not really sure what to say about it. It's been
So Ops Director has been really good. It's been a great graphical platform-specific tool, and we use it across from dev through production. We have standard enterprise monitoring tools we use across all of our databases. So with the MarkLogic APIs, we've been fortunate enough that some of our vendor partners for our other enterprise tools have adapted and I use the word ingested the MarkLogic information to their tools. So from an enterprise standpoint, we can use those to monitor and alert off of. And in some areas where we still need Ops Director, we can set up alerts in there to feed into our enterprise monitoring. In terms of impact to the system, we have not seen any negative impact from it.
Yeah, but I think we mainly Ops Director today still we're using just within the database team.
Yeah.
As far as like enterprise alerting, we have other tools that are hooked into like the management API and are actually kicking off alerts to like our consoles and things like that.
It's okay. You can say what the other tools are that you're using for monitoring if you know what they are offhand. I think some in the audience might be interested.
So
in
right
that.
now, Computer Associates, the Nimbus product, they've been extremely helpful and have really stepped up and have integrated very well into MarkLogic.
Great.
Hi, just a couple of questions here, right? Do you said you had about 251 deployments this year?
Yeah.
How does testing work in organically into the changes you push? Meaning, do you have some sort of a test-driven development methodology that says code is pre-validated before it's kicked off? Or do you have multiple environments set up so you promote your code from dev to UAT to, in some fashion?
Yeah, so we have multiple environments. So, and there's a variety of gates, like within our deployment tool that we use is an IBM product called Urban Code. So through that, we'll pull in, deploy our latest version into lower environments. There's a variety of gates that goes through where quality and testing have to run their tests and sign off on it before that can promote up into any of our higher environments.
Is that automated as well, or is there a manual, piece involved there to verify and sign off on these changes?
It's automated in that if someone has requested a deployment, someone has to go in and say, I want to deploy to this environment. And then once all the approvals come through, that'll actually run on its own. But we still are, we don't let code just automatically deploy up into production without someone looking at it and approving it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just a variety of sign-offs that are built into the tool, and that when we want to deploy to production, that we're still going to go in and manually tell it to do that, but the actual deployment itself is automated.
Right. Just another completely unrelated question, right? You started out saying that you said you guys did a POC with CSV files in there. Mm-hmm. Can you give me any information on, nothing proprietary of course, but what sort of data sets do you actually deal with, and what kind of consumption need you have? What is the most complex consumption you have coming out of it, right?
What was the first part of the question around the CSV?
What kind of data comes into your, into your ecosystem,
So we try to accept XML and JSON. That CSV was, during that project, we had one plan to deliver XML, and it was not coming to fruition quick enough. So we improvised, and we created something on the side to get us over that hump. So it was good. It showed the flexibility of the tool and the resources we have. It was also a learning experience that, moving on with how I talked about how we had to stitch the CSV files together to create XML, that was a little more time consuming than we really wanted to spend doing that. So that was sort of a once and done type of thing for us. Like today, we expect XML and JSON to be coming in, and that'll run through. In terms of consumption, our current application out there is a .NET application coming through, and it's they have some pretty complex. I think the searches are the most challenging that they're throwing at us right now, to where we're we're scanning across multiple customers and insureds and whatnot, and trying to return back just what you need to see to that individual making that request. Did I answer your question?
I'm trying to see if you do any kind of aggregated reporting or something like that, at scale, using information. It's not search and retrieval, but more of a reporting and, eventual, feed to a data mart somewhere. Do you have any such use cases you use MarkLogic for?
So if I heard it correctly, you were asking if we send the data to a data mart or someplace else?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Our goal is we're going to try to use the hub for both real-time data access. So our hub is a copy of all of our core systems in real time.
Okay.
And then from that, I want to try to support queries coming in from laptops, smartphones, whatnot, and also trying to do reporting off of that.
Including aggregation type reports?
Yep.
Great.
That's what we're going to try to do.
Okay. Other question? Oh, great. We've got just a few minutes. So.
Yeah, I'll be quick. If you could highlight on the load balancer, like what leads to the decision of having the number of clusters and the number of nodes within? Is it the performance that we hit with respect to MarkLogic when we are ingesting, or is there any baseline that we need to start off during installation?
Yeah, go with that one. It was sort of just kind of trial and error with, we had an idea of how fast we would want an ingestion to move through our hub, and getting our sizing right on, within our hub, we kind of segregate that, we have on some of our hosts or nodes have only final, they're all final for us, the other ones have staging. And so we set up our load balancers that they're managing that traffic instead of sending it all over the hub. But it was more just trial and error, try that. Okay, if we add a couple more nodes to staging, is that helping? Is that worth it? Shrink it back down. And then, we just, of course, have the load balancer in front of all of it, so we're not overloading any one host.
So you're talking about analytics on top of it. Are you moving the data to Mart's area, or are you doing within here? Like, how are you doing that?
So we're working our way through it, where we're learning. We want to try to keep as much utilization off a single copy of the data. So we're using views and
Like TDE.
the TDEs within the hub to help with that. I think at some point, based on the type of tooling that's being used to visualize it, some of the data will go over there, right? But primarily, we're going to try to keep it within one construct right now.
So when you do the analytics, like, are you using the historical data or only the latest snapshot?
The historical versus the snapshot.
Like, what I mean is, like, are you storing history in the same database?
Yes. So as we're working through that, the history will be within the document. It will not be within the versioning of the document necessarily.
So you do have the history in the database, and you've organized it within the document entity itself.
Yeah, the reporting aspect is still, I think here in the remainder of 18, we'll have some, I'll call it simple reporting coming out. I think, well, we're still working through the details of what analytics and really more complex reporting is going to look like. We're still working through that.
Okay, this is going to be the last one, I promise.
The reason we are asking is, like, we have a use case to store the history, and we are trying to analyze how we can do it. Like, what is your advice? Like, how the real-time search effect on that when you do the harmonizations and storing all the history in the document?
So when you're using the envelope pattern, so we're using the envelope pattern to show that this is the payload that came over. Then we run another job that runs and exposes certain elements of that as metadata, which is what the search is hitting. As you come through and you're looking at history, you might have versions, which in our case is showing proof to our business users that they can trust this. There wasn't some magic that changed Brian to Joe or something like that, right? It's there. It's like an audit, if you will, for trust. In terms of the performance, we have not seen, because we do have feeds coming in constantly, but again, our load isn't such that we're really pushing the system right now. I purposely sized the system so we have more resources. I did not go into this hardware constrained or memory constrained and get in front of my business and say, oh, it would have been much better if. We took that off the table, and we purposely oversized our infrastructure because it's enough of a challenge to go through the NoSQL change from relational. Then there's a lot of concepts that change from the mindset of how we do traditional database data warehouse. That's tough enough. So the last thing I wanted to put in front of our customers is, yeah, if we had invested a little more in our hardware, our memory would have been better. Let's just remove that. Let's really focus on the use case and getting the stuff in and out.
All right, with that, Brian, David, thank you very much. And I think it's time for lunch.
Thank you.